Most men believe that if a food is labeled healthy, it stays healthy forever. But after the age of 50, your body no longer plays by the same rules, and foods that once protected you can quietly begin to harm you if they are eaten the wrong way. Aging changes your hormones, your blood vessels, your insulin response, and even the way your liver processes fat and sugar. And science is very clear on this point. The same diet that worked at 30 can accelerate decline at 60. Research shows that testosterone naturally drops about 1% per year after 40. But what most men don't realize is that food choices can double that decline or slow it dramatically. This is where healthy foods become dangerous, not because they are bad, but because the body that receives them has changed. Eggs are a perfect example. Eggs are rich in cholesterol, and cholesterol is the raw material your body uses to make testosterone. Yet studies show that when eggs are cooked at high temperatures or paired with inflammatory oils, the cholesterol becomes oxidized, and oxidized cholesterol is directly linked to arterial plaque formation. Autopsy studies of heart disease patients have found oxidized cholesterol embedded in artery walls, not dietary cholesterol itself, and that oxidation often happens in the pan, not in the body. The shocking part is that many men eat eggs every morning thinking they are supporting strength and muscle, while unknowingly increasing vascular inflammation that reduces blood flow to the brain and reproductive organs. Blood flow is not a luxury after 50. It is survival. Erectile dysfunction, memory decline, and fatigue often begin as circulation problems long before they become visible symptoms. Fruit tells a similar story. Fruit is natural, but fructose is processed almost entirely by the liver, and aging livers process fructose far more slowly than younger ones. Studies from metabolic research centers show that excessive fructose intake increases visceral fat, the most hormonally dangerous fat in the body, because it converts testosterone into estrogen through aromatase enzymes stored in fat tissue. This means that the same fruit bowl that once fueled your workouts can now quietly suppress your masculinity if eaten without awareness. The most dangerous part is that this damage is silent. You do not feel insulin resistance developing. You do not feel inflammation building in your arteries. You only notice it years later when energy disappears, motivation drops, and muscle becomes harder to maintain no matter how hard you try. Large population studies consistently show that men over 50 who consume high amounts of refined carbohydrates and oxidized fats have significantly lower testosterone levels than men who consume the same calories from whole foods prepared correctly. This is not about eating less, it is about eating intelligently. Even timing matters. Research on circadian metabolism shows that glucose tolerance is highest in the morning and lowest at night, meaning that fruit eaten late in the day causes far higher blood sugar spikes than the same fruit eaten earlier. Those spikes trigger insulin, and insulin directly suppresses testosterone production in the testes. This is why so many men believe testosterone decline is inevitable when, in reality, it is often accelerated by modern eating habits that ignore age-related biology. What makes this even more alarming is that most dietary advice is not age-specific. Guidelines are written for populations, not aging male physiology. Clinical endocrinology journals repeatedly emphasize that older men require higher nutrient density, lower glycemic load, and reduced inflammatory exposure to maintain hormonal balance. Yet supermarket shelves are filled with foods marketed as heart healthy or natural that spike insulin or oxidize fats when prepared incorrectly. Even vegetable oils, long promoted as healthy, have been shown in controlled laboratory studies to produce toxic aldehydes when heated, compounds that damage DNA and accelerate cellular aging. These aldehydes are absorbed into the bloodstream and increase oxidative stress, a known inhibitor of testosterone synthesis. The tragedy is not ignorance. It is misplaced trust. Men trust labels instead of biology. They trust habits instead of evidence. And biology always wins. The human body after 50 is less forgiving, less adaptable, and more honest about consequences. But here is the hopeful truth supported by decades of nutritional research. When men adjust how they eat rather than what they eat, dramatic improvements follow. Studies show that reducing insulin spikes alone can increase free testosterone by measurable amounts within weeks. Improving fat quality improves endothelial function, restoring blood flow. Lowering inflammation improves energy, mood, and libido. These are not motivational claims. They are physiological responses documented in peer-reviewed research. Healthy foods do not betray you. Misuse does. Eggs cooked gently become hormone supportive instead of inflammatory. Fruit eaten strategically becomes protective instead of disruptive. The difference between decline and vitality is often just knowledge applied consistently. The men who age best are not those with perfect genetics. They are the ones who understand that aging is a negotiation, not a surrender. They adapt their habits to match their biology. They stop asking, "Is this food healthy?" and start asking, "Is this food healthy for me now?" That question alone changes outcomes. Because after 50, food is no longer just fuel. It is information. Every bite tells your body whether to build or break down, to protect or inflame, to preserve masculinity, or quietly dismantle it. And the most dangerous foods are never the obvious ones. They are the familiar ones you stopped questioning years ago. Testosterone does not disappear suddenly, and it is not stolen by age alone. It is slowly strangled by blood sugar spikes and chronic inflammation, two silent forces that most men never connect to their hormones until the damage is already done. After 50, the body's ability to control glucose weakens, muscle cells become less responsive to insulin, and every spike in blood sugar triggers a hormonal chain reaction that directly suppresses testosterone production. Endocrinology research has shown that when insulin rises, testosterone falls, because insulin signals the body that energy storage is more important than reproduction or muscle maintenance. In laboratory studies, men with insulin resistance consistently show lower free testosterone, even when total testosterone appears normal, which explains why so many men are told their labs look fine while they feel exhausted, unmotivated, and weaker every year. Inflammation makes this even worse. Chronic low-grade inflammation, the kind caused by poor diet rather than injury, interferes with the communication between the brain and the testes, blunting the signals that tell the body to produce testosterone in the first place. Studies measuring C-reactive protein, a marker of inflammation, show an inverse relationship with testosterone levels, meaning the more inflamed the body, the less testosterone it produces. This is not coincidence. It is chemistry. Inflammatory cytokines directly inhibit Leydig cells, the testosterone-producing cells in the testes, essentially putting hormone production into survival mode. Blood sugar spikes and inflammation often come from foods men believe are harmless or even beneficial. Refined carbohydrates, hidden sugars, fruit juices, and seed oils flood the bloodstream with glucose and inflammatory compounds faster than the aging body can handle. After 50, muscle mass declines unless actively preserved, and muscle is the primary site where glucose is absorbed. With less muscle, more sugar stays in the blood, more insulin is released, and testosterone is pushed further down. This creates a vicious cycle. Lower testosterone leads to less muscle leads to worse blood sugar control, and worse blood sugar control further suppresses testosterone. Large population studies have shown that men with type 2 diabetes have significantly lower testosterone levels than healthy men of the same age. But the more alarming truth is that this hormonal damage begins years before diabetes is diagnosed. You do not need to be diabetic to be hormonally compromised. You only need repeated daily insulin spikes. Inflammation adds another layer of destruction. Oxidative stress from inflammatory diets damages blood vessels, reducing nitric oxide production, which is essential for healthy circulation. Reduced blood flow affects not only the heart, but also the brain and reproductive organs, contributing to erectile dysfunction and cognitive decline that are often blamed on aging instead of vascular damage. Research published in cardiovascular journals has shown that endothelial dysfunction appears years before heart disease symptoms, and testosterone decline closely tracks this dysfunction. Testosterone is not just a sex hormone. It is a metabolic hormone, deeply involved in blood sugar regulation, fat distribution, and inflammation control. When testosterone drops, visceral fat increases, and visceral fat is biologically active tissue that produces estrogen and inflammatory compounds. This means that inflammation does not just lower testosterone. Low testosterone feeds inflammation in return. It is a hormonal trap that tightens with every poor dietary decision. What makes this crisis invisible is that modern diets normalize constant blood sugar elevation. Breakfast cereals, fruit smoothies, toast, and juices create glucose surges before the day even begins. Research on postprandial glucose shows that these spikes can last for hours, meaning testosterone suppression is not a momentary event, but a daily condition. Over time, the brain adapts by reducing luteinizing hormone output, the signal that tells the testes to make testosterone, because the body interprets constant metabolic stress as an unsafe environment for reproduction and strength. This is why stress hormones like cortisol rise while testosterone falls, and why men feel wired but tired, anxious yet unmotivated. Clinical trials have demonstrated that improving insulin sensitivity through diet alone can raise testosterone levels without medication, sometimes within weeks. Lowering sugar intake reduces inflammation markers, restores insulin signaling, and reactivates hormone production pathways that were never broken, only suppressed. Even sleep quality improves when blood sugar is stabilized, and sleep is when the majority of testosterone is produced. Fragmented sleep caused by nighttime glucose spikes further compounds hormonal decline, creating another feedback loop that accelerates aging. The shocking truth is that testosterone therapy cannot fully overcome poor metabolic health. Studies show that men on testosterone replacement who remain insulin resistant see blunted benefits compared to men who improve diet and inflammation first. Hormones cannot work in a hostile internal environment. The body prioritizes survival over strength, always. This is why traditional cultures with stable blood sugar patterns maintained vitality into old age without modern medicine, while modern men experienced decline decades earlier, despite advanced healthcare. Testosterone loss is not an isolated event. It is a signal that the internal environment has become inflammatory and metabolically unstable. When blood sugar is controlled and inflammation is reduced, the body remembers how to function. Hormone production resumes not because of supplements or injections, but because the conditions for vitality are restored. This is the part most men are never told. Testosterone is not something you chase. It is something you allow by removing what suppresses it. Every stable meal, every avoided spike, every reduction in inflammatory load sends a message to the body that it is safe to build again. And the body listens. The men who reclaim energy, strength, and confidence after 50 are not fighting biology. They are aligning with it. They understand that blood sugar and inflammation are not abstract medical terms, but daily decisions that determine whether testosterone survives or fades. Once you see this connection, you can never unsee it, because every bite becomes a choice between decline and resilience, and the science is clear about where that path leads. Most men are taught to eat for calories, to count numbers, to chase fullness or restriction, but after 50, calories stop telling the truth, because the body no longer responds to food as fuel alone, it responds to food as instruction. Every bite becomes a hormonal signal, and science shows that the aging male body interprets those signals very differently than it did decades earlier. Testosterone, muscle, energy, and mental sharpness are not determined by how much you eat, but by what your body believes you are telling it to do. Clinical research in endocrinology makes this painfully clear. When the body senses abundance without balance, it chooses storage and inflammation over strength and reproduction. This is why men can eat the same number of calories they always have and still lose muscle, gain fat, and feel weaker every year. The message is wrong, not the math. Testosterone is built from cholesterol, protein, micronutrients, and rest, but it is destroyed by hormonal confusion. When meals are dominated by empty calories, rapid sugars, or inflammatory fats, the brain interprets the environment as unsafe, and hormone production is dialed down as a protective measure. Studies show that luteinizing hormone, the signal from the brain that tells the testes to produce testosterone, drops when the body experiences repeated metabolic stress, even if calorie intake is adequate. This means you can be well-fed and hormonally starved at the same time. Eating for hormones means understanding that quality overrides quantity and timing overrides habit. Research on protein distribution shows that older men require higher protein per meal to stimulate muscle protein synthesis because aging muscle becomes resistant to weak signals. If protein intake is diluted across low-quality meals, the body simply does not respond. Muscle is not maintained by calories. It is maintained by clear anabolic signals. Testosterone amplifies those signals, but only when the body believes the conditions are right. Fat quality is another misunderstood command. Decades of fear around dietary fat taught men to avoid the very nutrients required for hormone production. Controlled studies show that diets too low in fat reduce testosterone levels, while diets rich in monounsaturated and saturated fats from whole foods increase them. Cholesterol is not the enemy. Inflammation is. When fats are consumed in their natural form, the body uses them to build hormones and cell membranes. When fats are oxidized, refined, or chemically altered, they become stress signals that shut hormone production down. The liver plays a central role in this decision-making process. After 50, liver efficiency declines, and the liver becomes less capable of processing toxins, excess sugar, and damaged fats. When the liver is overloaded, it prioritizes detoxification over hormone metabolism, leading to higher estrogen and lower testosterone. This is why visceral fat accumulates even in men who do not overeat. The food is not supporting hormonal clearance. Micronutrients quietly decide outcomes as well. Zinc, magnesium, vitamin D, and selenium are essential for testosterone synthesis. Yet large nutritional surveys show that older men are consistently deficient in these nutrients, despite adequate calorie intake. The body cannot build what it does not have the materials for. No amount of eating compensates for missing components. This is why supplementation sometimes helps, but food-based nutrient density works better because nutrients arrive with cofactors the body recognizes. Eating for hormones also means respecting circadian biology. Testosterone production follows a daily rhythm, peaking during deep sleep and responding to daytime metabolic signals. Late-night eating, especially carbohydrates, disrupts this rhythm by elevating insulin and cortisol when testosterone should be rising. Sleep studies show that even 1 week of poor sleep can reduce testosterone by up to 15%, an effect comparable to aging 10 years. Food timing influences sleep quality, and sleep quality determines hormone output. Calories consumed at the wrong time act like stress, not fuel. This is why men who eat clean but ignore timing still struggle. The body is not a machine, it is a clock. Eating for hormones requires balance, not extremes. Chronic undereating signals scarcity, raising cortisol and suppressing testosterone. Chronic overeating signals chaos, raising insulin and inflammation. Both paths lead to the same outcome: hormonal shutdown. The men who age best eat enough to signal safety, strength, and stability. Anthropological studies of long-lived populations show consistent patterns: moderate caloric intake, high nutrient density, stable blood sugar, and minimal inflammation. These populations did not track calories. They followed biological cues that modern men have been taught to ignore. The most shocking realization is that testosterone decline is often reversible, not through force, but through permission. When the body senses that energy is steady, nutrients are sufficient, and inflammation is low, hormone production resumes naturally. Clinical trials show improvements in testosterone, muscle strength, and metabolic health when men shift from calorie-focused diets to hormone-supportive eating patterns, even without weight loss. The scale does not measure hormonal health. Strength, clarity, and vitality do. Eating for hormones means choosing foods that send a clear message: build, repair, protect. Whole proteins signal muscle preservation. Healthy fats signal hormone production. Fiber and vegetables signal metabolic safety. Stable meals signal predictability, and predictability lowers stress hormones that compete with testosterone. This approach does not require perfection, but it does require awareness. The body keeps score of patterns, not single meals. Over time, those patterns determine whether testosterone is treated as essential or expendable. The men who reclaim their strength after 50 are not chasing youth. They are restoring communication with their biology. They stop eating to satisfy cravings shaped by marketing and start eating to satisfy systems shaped by evolution. This shift changes everything because once food becomes instruction instead of indulgence, the body responds with resilience. Testosterone is not lost because time passes. It is lost because the body is told day after day that strength is no longer needed. Change the message and the response follows. That is the quiet power of eating for hormones, and it is the difference between merely surviving the years ahead and inhabiting them with purpose, energy, and authority.